Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A time of plagues, punishments, and secrets most history books conveniently forget to mention. We're diving into the hidden horrors of medieval life. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. We're talking about the stuff they don't put in the fairy tales. The torture chambers. The mass graves. The casual brutality that made everyday survival feel like a miracle. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to medieval Europe. The Dark Ages. And trust me, they earned that name. This is a world where the church controlled everything, where disease could wipe out entire villages in weeks, where your neighbor might accuse you of witchcraft because you looked at them funny. A world where justice meant torture, where medicine meant bloodletting, and where the average lifespan was so short that making it to 30 felt like an achievement worthy of celebration. Let's set the scene. It's sometime between the 5th and 15th centuries. The Roman Empire has collapsed. The Renaissance hasn't happened yet. You're living in that dark, terrifying gap in between. And if you think modern life is hard, just wait. Because in medieval times, almost everything was actively trying to kill you. Your home is a wooden hut that leaks when it rains and freezes when it snows. You share this space with your entire family, possibly some livestock, and definitely more parasites than you can count. Privacy doesn't exist. Personal space doesn't exist. The concept of childhood as a protected, innocent time. Completely unknown. Kids work from the moment they can walk. And if they make it past age 5 without dying from disease, malnutrition, or accident, that's genuinely remarkable. Your diet is almost entirely grain. Bread if you're lucky. Porridge if you're not. Meat is a luxury you see maybe once a year, during festivals. Vegetables exist but they're expensive and hard to preserve. So you eat the same bland, heavy food every single day. Your stomach is always either painfully empty or uncomfortably bloated. There's no in-between. Water is unsafe to drink, so everyone, and I mean everyone, including children, drinks weak beer instead. Not because medieval people were party animals, but because the brewing process killed the bacteria that would otherwise kill you. Sobriety is actually more dangerous than mild intoxication. Let that sink in. The church controls not just your spiritual life but every aspect of your existence. When you wake up, when you work, when you rest, what you eat, who you marry, how you have sex, how you raise your children, how you die. All of it is dictated by religious law. And questioning that law. That's heresy. And heresy gets you tortured until you confess, then burned alive. So you don't question. You obey. You pray. And you hope God is listening because the church definitely is. Disease is everywhere. Plague, tuberculosis, leprosy, dysentery, smallpox. These aren't rare occurrences. They're constant threats. You probably know multiple people who've died from infections that started with a simple cut. Because there are no antibiotics. No understanding of germs. No sanitation worth mentioning. Just prayers, bloodletting, and hope. Violence is casual and constant. Domestic abuse is normalized. Public executions are entertainment. Wars between lords can erupt over the smallest insults, and when they do, it's the peasants who suffer. Your village gets burned. Your crops get stolen. Your family gets killed. And there's nothing you can do about it because you have no rights, no legal protections, no voice. This is the world we're exploring tonight. Not the romanticized medieval fantasy of knights and maidens. But the real, dark, brutal truth. The secrets they don't tell you in school. The horrors that made medieval life a daily struggle for survival. so settle in. Get comfortable. Because over the next few hours, we're going to uncover every dark secret medieval Europe tried to bury. And trust me, there are a lot of them. So you've woken up in medieval Europe. You've survived the night in your lice-infested hut. You've choked down your morning porridge. And now, something's wrong. You feel sick. Maybe it's a fever. Maybe it's a cough that won't go away. Maybe you cut your hand on a farming tool and now it's swollen and oozing pus. You need medical help. Too bad. Because in the Middle Ages, seeing a doctor might actually speed up your death. Let's start with the fundamental problem. Medieval medicine is based on a theory that's completely, spectacularly wrong. The theory of the four humors. According to this brilliant piece of ancient nonsense, your body contains four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When these humors are balanced, you're healthy. When they're out of balance, you get sick. Simple, right? Also completely fictional. But medieval doctors believe this with absolute conviction. So when you show up with symptoms, they don't look for the actual cause of your illness. They don't examine you carefully or run tests. They just assume one of your humors is out of whack. And their solution? Remove the excess humor. Physically. From your body. Got a fever? That's too much blood. Time for bloodletting. A doctor, or more likely a barber surgeon because medical professionals and hairdressers were somehow the same job, will take a sharp blade and open a vein in your arm. Then they'll drain blood into a bowl. How much? Well, that depends on how they're feeling that day. There's no precise measurement. No monitoring of your vital signs. Just eyeballing it and hoping you don't pass out. Which you probably will. Or maybe they'll use leeches. Actual blood-sucking worms applied directly to your skin. The leeches attach, gorge themselves on your blood, and eventually fall off when they're full. This is considered medicine. Advanced medicine, even. Some physicians keep special leech farms to ensure a steady supply. Because nothing says healthcare like a jar full of parasites. Feeling congested? That's too much phlegm. The cure? Making you vomit. Violently and repeatedly. They'll give you substances specifically designed to induce vomiting, then stand back and watch as you empty your stomach again and again. And if vomiting doesn't work, they'll move on to the other end. Powerful laxatives that will have you running to the latrine for days. The goal is to purge the excess humor. The result is severe dehydration and weakness. But hey, at least your humors are balanced now. Assuming you survive. You broke a bone. This is where things get really medieval. There's no anesthesia. None. No painkillers beyond alcohol or maybe some herbal concoctions that barely take the edge off. So when the bone setter manipulates your broken limb back into position, you feel every single second of it. You're held down by several strong people while you scream. And if the break is bad enough that they need to amputate, same deal. You're awake for the whole thing. The saw is rarely clean. Sterilization isn't a concept yet. Germ theory won't be discovered for another few centuries. So the tools that cut into your flesh have been used on other patients, washed in water at best, and are probably carrying all sorts of bacteria. Infection is almost guaranteed. An infection in the Middle Ages is a death sentence. Let's say you develop an abscess. A pocket of infection that needs to be drained. The doctor will cut it open, squeeze out the pus, and maybe stuff the wound with cloth soaked in wine or honey. Will this help? Maybe. Wine has some antibacterial properties, and honey can prevent infection. But mostly, you're just hoping your body fights off the infection on its own. Because that's all medieval medicine really is. Hoping your body fixes itself despite everything the doctor is doing to you. And if nothing works? If you keep getting sicker despite the bloodletting and the purging and the prayers? Then clearly, the problem is spiritual. You must have sinned. So a priest is called to hear your confession. You're given last rites. Everyone starts preparing for your death because at this point, that's the most likely outcome. The irony is that medieval doctors sometimes do stumble onto treatments that actually work. Willow bark for pain, which contains a compound similar to aspirin. Certain herbs that genuinely have medicinal properties. But these successes are mixed in with so much nonsense, so many harmful practices, that going to a doctor is essentially a coin flip. Maybe you get lucky. Probably you don't. So here's the dark secret about medieval medicine. It kills almost as many people as it saves. Maybe more. The doctors mean well. They're working with the best knowledge they have. But that knowledge is wrong. Fundamentally, dangerously wrong. And until someone figures out that germs exist, that blood should stay inside your body, and that maybe drilling holes in people's skulls to release evil spirits isn't actually helping, medieval medicine will continue to be one of the most dangerous things about living in the Middle Ages. You've survived the bloodletting. Congratulations. But now comes an even more terrifying threat. And this one doesn't come from disease or bad medicine. It comes from your neighbors. Because in medieval Europe, anyone can accuse you of witchcraft. And once that accusation is made, your life is effectively over. Let's be clear about something. Witches, as medieval people imagined them, don't exist. There are no women flying on broomsticks. No demonic pacts signed in blood. No midnight Sabbaths where Satan appears as a goat. It's all fantasy. Paranoid, terrified fantasy. But that doesn't matter. Because the church and the legal system believe in witches with absolute conviction. And if they believe you're a witch, then you are one. Evidence is optional. The witch hunts really pick up steam in the late medieval period and explode during the early modern era. But the groundwork is laid much earlier. The idea that certain people, usually women, have made deals with the devil to gain supernatural powers. That they can curse crops, cause impotence, kill babies, spoil milk, bring storms. Basically, anything bad that happens can be blamed on witchcraft. So who gets accused? Almost always women. Especially women who don't fit neatly into medieval society's expectations. The widow living alone. The midwife who delivered a stillborn baby. The healer who uses herbs. The woman who's too outspoken, too independent, too ugly, too pretty, too old, too young. Any woman, really, if someone decides they don't like her. But here's the truly dark part. Once you're accused, there's almost no way to prove your innocence. The medieval legal system has created a perfect trap. Because the trials aren't about finding the truth. They're about confirming what everyone already believes. That you're guilty. Let's walk through what happens when you're accused of witchcraft. First, you're arrested. Maybe in the middle of the night. Maybe dragged from your home in front of your family. You're taken to a cell. Dark, cold, filthy. You might wait there for weeks or months before your trial. No lawyer. No right to defend yourself. No one explaining what you're accused of in detail. Just fear and waiting. Then comes the investigation. And this is where things get medieval. The investigators are looking for the devil's mark. A spot on your body where Satan branded you as his servant. This could be a mole, a birthmark, a scar, anything really. They'll strip you naked and examine every inch of your body. And they will find something. Everyone has some kind of mark. And once they find it, that's evidence. You're a witch. Or they'll test you. Trial by water is a popular one. They tie your hands and feet and throw you into a river or pond. If you sink, you're innocent. Congratulations, you're also probably dead from drowning. If you float, you're guilty because water, being pure, rejects the evil of a witch. So you float, they pull you out, and now you're definitely getting executed. There's also the swimming test variation. They tie your right thumb to your left big toe, left thumb to right big toe, and toss you in. The logic is the same. Sink equals innocent but drowned. Float equals guilty and doomed. Some accused witches are subjected to sleep deprivation. Kept awake for days until they're so exhausted and confused they'll confess to anything just to make it stop. Others are questioned repeatedly, the same questions over and over, looking for inconsistencies in their answers. And if you change your story even slightly because you're terrified and exhausted, that's proof you're lying. Which means you're guilty. And then there's the torture. We won't go into graphic detail, but understand this. Medieval authorities have tools and techniques specifically designed to cause maximum pain while keeping you alive long enough to confess. And most people do confess. Not because they're actually witches, but because the pain is unbearable. You'll say anything to make it stop. You'll admit to flying on broomsticks, kissing the devil's backside, poisoning wells, whatever they want to hear. Once you confess, the trial is essentially over. You're paraded in front of a court. Your confession is read aloud. Maybe you're allowed to speak, but anything you say will be used against you. If you maintain your innocence, you're clearly a liar and still in league with Satan. If you confess again, you're confirming your guilt. There's no winning move. Except here's the thing. The real evil isn't the supposed witches. It's the system that creates mass hysteria, encourages false accusations, and murders innocent people based on superstition and fear. The witch hunts destroy communities. They turn neighbors against each other. They give petty grudges lethal consequences. Don't like someone? Accuse them of witchcraft. Want their property? Accuse them of witchcraft. Just feel like watching someone burn? Accuse them of witchcraft. This is one of medieval Europe's darkest secrets. Not that witches existed, but that people were so terrified of them that they created a system of legal murder. Thousands of innocent people, mostly women, killed because of paranoia, misogyny, and a legal system that valued confessions over truth. So if you're a woman in medieval Europe, here's some advice. Don't stand out. Don't be too good at anything. Don't live alone. Don't make enemies. Don't have cats, especially black ones. Don't know too much about herbs. Don't be too beautiful or too ugly. Don't be too quiet or too loud. Just blend in, keep your head down, and pray that when the witch hunters come to town, they look at someone else. Because in the Middle Ages, being accused of witchcraft is basically a death sentence. And the trial? That's just the formality before the execution. You've avoided being accused of witchcraft. Well done. But don't celebrate yet. Because in medieval Europe, the legal system isn't designed to protect you. It's designed to terrify you into obedience. And if you step out of line, even slightly, the punishments are brutal, public, and designed to serve as warnings to everyone else. Let's start with the basics. What counts as a crime in the Middle Ages? Pretty much anything the authorities don't like. Theft, obviously. Murder, sure. But also speaking disrespectfully to a noble. Poaching a rabbit from the Lord's forest. Not paying your taxes. Adultery. Blasphemy. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The list is endless and often arbitrary. And the punishments? They're not about rehabilitation. They're not about giving you a second chance. They're about making an example of you. About showing everyone else what happens when you break the rules. So punishments are public. Very public. Executions, floggings, brandings, mutilations. All performed in a town square where everyone can watch. Steal a loaf of bread because your family is starving. That hand you used to steal. You might lose it. Literally. A quick chop with an axe, and now you're a one-handed beggar with even worse prospects than before. The logic is simple. You stole with that hand, so the hand must be punished. The fact that losing your hand makes it nearly impossible for you to work and support yourself. Not the authorities' problem. Get caught poaching deer from the royal forest. That's a serious crime. Those deer belong to the king or the local lord, and taking one is basically stealing from nobility. The punishment could be blinding. They'll heat a metal poker until it's red hot and press it into your eyes. Or maybe they'll just hang you. Depends on the lord's mood that day. Commit murder. If you're caught, and that's a big if because medieval law enforcement is basically non-existent in rural areas, you're looking at execution. But not a quick, merciful death. The method depends on your social class and the nature of your crime. Nobles might get beheaded, which is relatively quick if the executioner is skilled. Commoners. You're getting hanged. And medieval hanging isn't the drop and snap method that kills you quickly. It's slow strangulation. You're lifted just high enough that your toes can't touch the ground, and then you dangle there, choking, for several minutes until you finally die. Treason, which includes basically any act against the king or the established order, gets you the worst punishment medieval minds could devise. In England, it's called being hanged, drawn, and quartered. First, you're hanged until you're almost dead but not quite. Then you're cut down, and while you're still conscious, they disembowel you. Your internal organs are removed and sometimes burned in front of you. Then, finally, you're beheaded. And after you're dead, your body is cut into 4 pieces and displayed in different parts of the kingdom as a warning. But executions aren't the only public punishments. There's also the pillory and the stocks. Wooden devices that lock your head and hands, or just your feet, in place. You're left in the town square for hours or days. Sounds almost mild compared to execution, right? Except the public is encouraged to participate in your punishment. People throw rotten food at you. Rocks. Feces. They mock you, spit on you, sometimes beat you. You can't defend yourself. You can't escape. You just stand there and take it. Women who gossip too much or nag their husbands might be forced to wear a scold's bridle. It's a metal cage that fits over your head with a piece that goes in your mouth, sometimes with spikes that pierce your tongue if you try to speak. You're paraded through the streets wearing this contraption while everyone laughs at you. The message is clear. Women should be quiet and obedient. Adultery, especially for women, can result in public shaming rituals. You might be forced to walk through the town naked or wearing a sign declaring your sin. In some places, you're whipped as you walk. The humiliation is the punishment, along with the permanent damage to your reputation. In a small medieval community, your reputation is everything. Destroy it, and you're effectively destroyed. And here's the really dark part. People enjoy these spectacles. Public executions are entertainment. Families bring their children. Vendors sell food and drink. It's like a festival, except the main event is watching someone die in agony. The crowds cheer when the condemned appears. They jeer and shout insults. When the execution happens, they watch with fascination. This is normal. This is what passes for public entertainment when there's no television, no movies, no internet. The authorities know this. They use it. Make the punishment public and gruesome enough, and people will think twice before breaking the law. At least that's the theory. In practice, crime continues because people are desperate and desperate people take risks. But the punishments remain brutal because brutality is the point. There's also no consistency in how justice is applied. If you're wealthy or connected, you might escape punishment entirely. Bribe the right official, call in a favor from a powerful friend, and suddenly the evidence disappears. But if you're poor and friendless, the full weight of medieval justice falls on you like a hammer. Trial by combat is still a thing in some places. If you're accused of a crime and you can't prove your innocence, you can challenge your accuser to a fight. The logic is that God will ensure the innocent party wins. In reality, it just means whoever is bigger and better at fighting wins. And if you lose, you're executed. So you better hope God likes you and that you know how to use a sword. This is medieval justice. Arbitrary, brutal, and public. Where punishment is more about spectacle than fairness. Where your social class determines whether you get mercy or mutilation. Where the crowd that watches you die today might be the crowd that dies tomorrow. Because in the Middle Ages, everyone is just one accusation, one mistake, one unlucky moment away from the executioner's block. Sleep well that you've survived the brutal justice system. You've avoided the witch hunters. You're still alive, which in medieval Europe is honestly an achievement. But now comes something that doesn't care about your social status, your innocence, or how carefully you've been living. The plague. And when it arrives, it kills everyone. Rich, poor, young, old, pious, sinful. The Black Death doesn't discriminate. Let's set the scene. It's 1347. Ships from the east arrive at European ports carrying trade goods, sailors, and something else. Rats. Specifically, rats infected with fleas carrying Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that causes bubonic plague. Within months, the disease spreads across Europe like wildfire. And the death toll is staggering. Estimates suggest that between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's entire population dies within just a few years. We're talking about 25 to 50 million people. Dead. But the numbers don't capture the horror of actually living through it. So let's talk about what happens when the plague comes to your village. First, you hear rumors. The disease is in the next town over. People are dying. Whole families wiped out overnight. You pray it doesn't come here. You pray harder than you've ever prayed in your life. It doesn't help. Because the plague doesn't care about prayers. Then someone in your village gets sick. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's someone you spoke to at the market yesterday. They develop a fever. Chills. Headaches. Within a day or two, swellings appear. Buboes, they're called. Painful, grotesque lumps in the groin, armpits, or neck where the lymph nodes have swollen to the size of eggs or even apples. The skin around them turns black. Hence the name, Black Death. The sick person is in agony. The buboes are incredibly painful. They might leak pus and blood. The fever climbs higher. Delirium sets in. Some victims develop black patches on their skin as blood vessels burst and tissue dies. Others cough up blood. That's the mnemonic version of the plague, which spreads through the air and kills even faster than the bubonic form. Within 3 to 5 days of symptoms appearing, most people are dead. Some die sooner. A few lucky ones survive, but they're rare. And even if you survive, you're probably permanently weakened, possibly scarred, definitely traumatized. Now multiply that by dozens of people in your village. Then hundreds. The dying happens so fast that there aren't enough healthy people to care for the sick. Families abandon their own members out of terror. Parents leave infected children. Husbands flee from dying wives. The social bonds that normally hold communities together completely break down. And the bodies. Oh, the bodies. At first, people try to maintain proper burial practices. Religious ceremonies, individual graves, all the rituals that help the living process death. But the plague kills faster than you can dig graves. Soon, there are bodies everywhere. In homes, in streets, piled up waiting for collection. The smell of death hangs over everything. Mass graves are dug. Huge pits where bodies are thrown in by the dozen, sometimes by the 100. No ceremonies. No individual markers. Just layer after layer of corpses covered with lime and dirt. And even these mass graves fill up quickly. Some cities resort to throwing bodies in rivers. Others just let them rot where they fall because there's literally no one left alive to move them. The living walk through streets lined with corpses. You step over dead bodies on your way to get water. You sleep in a house where half your family died yesterday. You're constantly surrounded by death, and you absolutely know, that you're probably next. Fear becomes the dominant emotion. People try everything to avoid the plague. Some flee to the countryside, thinking the disease only affects crowded cities. Wrong. It follows them. Others lock themselves in their homes, refusing to let anyone in or out. Some try extreme piety, flagellating themselves until they bleed, thinking God will spare the truly penitent. Doesn't work. Doctors try to help, but they're operating with medieval medical knowledge, which means they're useless. They don't understand contagion. They don't know about bacteria. They think the plague is caused by bad air, by an unfavorable alignment of the planets, by God's wrath. So their treatments are worthless. Bloodletting, which we've already established is terrible. Poultices made from herbs. Prayers. Amulets. None of it works. Some doctors wear the now famous plague doctor costume. A long robe, gloves, and a bird-like mask with a beak stuffed with herbs and flowers. The idea is that the sweet smells will protect them from the bad air causing the plague. It doesn't work, but the costume does create an absolutely terrifying figure. Imagine you're dying of plague and this person in a bird mask shows up. That's your last memory before death. The economic impact is catastrophic. Fields go unplowed because the farmers are dead. Shops close because the merchants are dead. Entire industries collapse. Food becomes scarce even in areas the plague hasn't reached yet because the supply chains have broken down. Starvation follows plague. Social order breaks down too. With so many people dead, who's enforcing the laws? Who's collecting taxes? Who's running the government? Criminals run wild. Looters rob abandoned homes and strip corpses of valuables. Some people, knowing they're probably going to die anyway, decide to spend their last days doing whatever they want. Morality becomes optional when death is certain. And the psychological trauma? Unimaginable. Survivors live with guilt. Why did they live when everyone around them died? They live with grief. They've lost parents, children, spouses, friends. Entire social networks are gone. They live with fear. Will the plague come back? Spoiler alert, it does. Multiple times over the next few centuries. The Black Death changes European society fundamentally. So many people die that labor becomes valuable for the first time. Peasants who survive can demand better wages, better treatment. The rigid feudal system starts to crack. Not immediately, not cleanly, but the plague plants seeds of social change that will eventually grow. But that's the long-term view. In the moment, during the plague years, all you know is death. Constant, unavoidable, random death. You go to sleep not knowing if you'll wake up with a fever. You wake up not knowing if today is the day the buboes appear. You live every moment knowing that this disease could kill you before sunset. This is what the Black Death was really like. Not just statistics and historical impacts, but the daily horror of watching everyone around you die while you wait to see if you're next. It's one of medieval Europe's darkest chapters. And for the people living through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. Because in many ways, it was. So you've survived the plague. Somehow. The odds were against you, but here you are. Still alive. Still breathing. Unfortunately, you're also still filthy. Because in medieval Europe, hygiene isn't just bad. It's a concept that barely exists. And the lack of basic cleanliness is killing people just as surely as the plague did. Let's start with the most basic question. When was the last time you bathed? If you're a typical medieval peasant, the answer is probably weeks ago. Maybe months. Possibly never, at least not a full-body bath. And before you judge too harshly, understand that bathing in the Middle Ages isn't just inconvenient. It's genuinely difficult and sometimes dangerous. First, there's the practical problem. You need water. A lot of water. And that water needs to be heated. Which means hauling water from a well or stream, bucket by bucket, then heating it over a fire. This takes hours and uses a massive amount of firewood, which isn't free. For a peasant family barely surviving, spending half a day and valuable fuel on a bath seems wasteful. So you don't. Second, there's the medical belief that bathing is actually harmful. Medieval doctors, working from ancient theories, believe that water opens your pores and lets disease into your body. They think you're safer keeping the layer of dirt and oil on your skin because it protects you. This is completely wrong, obviously, but it's what educated medical professionals believe. So if the doctors are telling you that bathing will make you sick, why would you risk it? The result is that most people go through life dirty. Genuinely, persistently filthy. Your skin is coated with layers of sweat, dirt, and oils. Your hair is greasy and probably home to lice. Speaking of lice, everyone has them. Rich, poor, young, old. Lice are just part of life. You pick them out of each other's hair as a social activity. It's bonding time with bonus parasite removal. Your clothes are also filthy because washing them is nearly as difficult as bathing yourself. You own maybe 2 outfits. One you're wearing, one spare if you're lucky. Washing clothes means scrubbing them in cold water, often in a stream, then waiting days for them to dry. In winter, they might freeze instead of drying. So you wear the same clothes for weeks or months, and they accumulate sweat, dirt, food stains, and various bodily fluids. Now let's talk about the toilet situation. Or rather, the lack of a toilet situation. Most peasants don't have latrines. They have a bucket. A wooden bucket that sits in the corner of your one-room house. You use it at night or when it's too cold or dangerous to go outside. And when it's full, you empty it. Where? Into the street, most likely. Yes, people literally throw their waste into the streets. Sometimes they shout a warning first. Garde-l'eau, in some places, which roughly translates to, watch out for the water. Except it's not water. It's human waste. And it's being dumped from second or third-story windows onto the street below. If you're walking by at the wrong time, well, that's your problem. Cities and towns have open sewers. Channels running down the middle of streets where all the waste flows. Animal droppings from horses and livestock. Human waste from chamber pots. Blood and offal from butcher shops. Dirty water from households. It all mixes together in these open channels and slowly drains toward the nearest river. The smell is indescribable. And in summer, when it's hot, the stench becomes almost unbearable. The streets themselves are often ankle-deep in mud and filth. There's no pavement in most places. Just dirt that turns to thick, clinging mud when it rains. And that mud is mixed with all the waste we just mentioned. Walking through a medieval city means wading through literal sewage. Wealthy people wear platform shoes to keep their feet above the worst of it. Poor people just accept that their feet are going to be perpetually dirty and wet. Inside homes, the floor is usually packed dirt. And onto this dirt floor, people throw rushes or straw to provide some cushioning and insulation. But these rushes accumulate food scraps, spilled liquids, feces from pets and small children, and various other refuse. They're changed maybe once or twice a year. So you're literally walking on months of accumulated garbage pressed into plant material. Food preparation happens in this same filthy environment. There's no refrigeration, so food spoils quickly. Meat goes bad. Milk sours. But you can't afford to waste food, so you eat it anyway and hope for the best. Flies land on your food. Rats scurry through your storage areas. Cross-contamination is constant because you don't understand the concept of germs. The connection between filth and disease won't be understood for centuries. Medieval people don't know about bacteria or viruses. They don't understand that the appalling sanitation is directly causing the constant outbreaks of dysentery, typhoid, cholera, and countless other diseases. They just accept that getting sick is normal and that most people die young from infections that started with something trivial. There are occasional attempts at cleanliness. Some cities pass laws requiring people to keep the streets clear in front of their homes. Public bathhouses exist in some places, though the church often disapproves of them as dens of sin. Wealthy nobles might bathe a few times a year. But for the average person, life is dirty, smelly, and disease-ridden. And here's the truly dark part. This isn't ignorance in the sense of not having access to knowledge. Ancient Romans had better sanitation. They had aqueducts, public baths, proper sewers. But that knowledge was lost when the Roman Empire fell. Medieval Europe actually went backward in terms of hygiene. They unlearned what previous civilizations knew. And millions of people died as a result. So when you imagine medieval life, don't picture clean peasants in picturesque villages. Picture people covered in grime, living in filth, surrounded by waste, breathing air thick with the stench of decay. That's the reality. And it's one of the reasons why medieval Europe was such a deadly place to live. Good night. Try not to think about the parasites that you've survived plague, filth, and public executions. You've kept your head down, avoided accusations of witchcraft, and somehow made it this far. But there's one institution you need to fear above all others. The Inquisition. Because the church doesn't just want your obedience. It wants your soul. And it will use any means necessary to save it. Even if that means destroying you in the process. Let's be clear about what the Inquisition actually is. It's not one thing. It's a series of institutions established by the Catholic Church to root out heresy. And heresy, in medieval terms, is basically anything the Church decides contradicts official doctrine. Believe the wrong thing about communion. Heresy. Question whether the Pope has absolute authority. Heresy. Suggest that maybe, just maybe, the Church is too wealthy and corrupt. Definitely heresy. The Inquisition starts in the 12th century as a response to various religious movements that the Church considers threatening. Groups like the Cathars in southern France, who have different beliefs about God and salvation. The Church can't tolerate this. So Pope Gregory IX establishes the Papal Inquisition around 1231. The goal is simple. Find heretics. Make them recant. And if they won't recant, eliminate them. Here's how it works. Inquisitors, usually Dominican or Franciscan friars, arrive in a town or region. They're educated, dedicated, and absolutely convinced they're doing God's work. They announce that anyone with information about heresy should come forward. And people do. Because your neighbors, your friends, even your family might report you if they think you've said or done something suspicious. The accusations can be based on almost anything. You questioned a church teaching. You own books the church hasn't approved. You were seen talking with someone later accused of heresy. You didn't attend Mass regularly enough. You made a joke about priests. Someone overheard you expressing doubt about a miracle. It doesn't take much. Once you're accused, you're summoned to appear before the inquisitors. There's no presumption of innocence. The fact that you've been accused is already damning. You're not told who accused you. You're not given a lawyer. You're expected to confess, and the inquisitors will keep questioning you until you do. The interrogations can last hours, days, weeks. The same questions over and over. Looking for inconsistencies in your answers. Trying to trap you with your own words. And if you maintain your innocence, they escalate. Because the Inquisition has permission to use torture. Not to punish you, that comes later, but to extract the truth. And truth, in this context, means confession. The methods are varied and horrific. We won't go into graphic detail, but understand that medieval inquisitors have access to tools and techniques specifically designed to cause unbearable pain while keeping you alive and conscious. The rack, which stretches your body until joints dislocate. The strappado, where your hands are tied behind your back and you're hoisted up by your wrists until your shoulders separate. Water torture. heat, crushing devices. The list goes on. And here's the terrible logic. If you confess under torture, that's proof of your guilt. If you don't confess, you must have made a pact with the devil that gives you supernatural resistance to pain, which is also proof of guilt. Either way, you lose. Most people confess. Not because they're actually heretics, but because the pain is too much. You'll say whatever they want to hear just to make it stop. You'll confess to things you didn't do, believe things you don't actually believe, implicate other people who might be completely innocent. The torture breaks you. That's what it's designed to do. After confession comes penance. If you confess, seem genuinely repentant, and the inquisitors believe you can be saved, you might be given a lighter punishment. Wearing special clothing that marks you as a former heretic. Public whippings. Pilgrimages to distant holy sites. Fines that bankrupt your family. Years of imprisonment. Your property might be confiscated, leaving your family destitute. But if you don't confess, or if you confess and then recant, or if the inquisitors decide you're too far gone to be saved, you're handed over to secular authorities for execution. The church doesn't want blood on its hands, technically, so it lets the state do the actual killing. But make no mistake, this is a church-ordered death. The preferred method is burning at the stake. You're tied to a wooden post surrounded by bundles of wood. The fire is lit. If you're lucky, you'll inhale enough smoke to pass out before the flames reach you. If you're not lucky, you're conscious for the whole thing. Feeling your skin blister and char, smelling your own flesh burn. Screaming until your lungs are too damaged to scream anymore. It takes several minutes to die. Every second is agony. Sometimes they show mercy. A bag of gunpowder hung around your neck so you die faster when the flames reach it. Or you're strangled first, then burned. But that's only if the authorities are feeling generous or if you confessed and showed proper repentance. Unrepentant heretics burn alive. The Spanish Inquisition, which starts in 1478, is particularly zealous. Initially targeting converted Jews and Muslims suspected of secretly practicing their old faiths, it eventually expands to prosecute all forms of heresy. The Spanish Inquisition becomes notorious for its thoroughness, its cruelty, and its willingness to use torture liberally. But here's what makes the Inquisition truly terrifying. It's not just about punishing actual heretics. It's about maintaining absolute control through fear. The Inquisition teaches everyone that questioning the church, even privately, even in your own thoughts, is dangerous. Because you never know who might report you. Your neighbor. Your spouse. Your own children might turn you in, either out of genuine religious fervor or because the Inquisition rewards informants. This creates a culture of paranoia and self-censorship. You don't just avoid saying heretical things. You avoid thinking them. You police your own mind because the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. The Inquisition doesn't need to investigate everyone. The threat is enough. The knowledge that they could come for you at any time keeps the entire population in line. Thousands of people are executed over the centuries the Inquisition operates. Thousands more are tortured, imprisoned, or ruined financially. Entire communities live in fear. Intellectual progress is stifled because asking questions, any questions, might be interpreted as heresy. Science, philosophy, even theology itself are constrained by the knowledge that one wrong word could end with you burning. The Inquisition is one of history's clearest examples of how religious authority, when combined with political power and the willingness to use extreme violence, can create a system of terror. It's not about saving souls. It's about control. Absolute, unquestionable control enforced through fear, pain, and public executions. So in medieval Europe, you don't just worry about plague and famine and war. You worry about what you say, what you think, who might be listening. Because the Inquisition is always watching. And if they decide you're a heretic, there's nothing you can do except confess, repent, and pray they show mercy. They usually don't. So here we are. You've made it through the night. You've survived plague, filth, torture, and terror. You've learned the dark secrets that medieval Europe tried to bury under centuries of romantic mythology. The castles and knights and chivalry. The fairy tales and legends. All of it built on a foundation of suffering that most history books conveniently forget to mention. Let's be honest about what we've discovered tonight. Medieval life, for the vast majority of people, was brutal beyond modern comprehension. Not occasionally brutal. Not brutal during wars or famines. Constantly, relentlessly brutal. From the moment you were born, assuming you survived birth, until the day you died, probably young, your life was defined by pain, fear, and struggle. You lived in filth because basic hygiene was either impossible or actively discouraged. You drank weak beer because the water would kill you. You worked from childhood until your body gave out. You watched your children die from diseases that are easily cured today. You lived under the absolute control of the church, knowing that one wrong word, one moment of doubt expressed out loud, could end with you burning at the stake. The medical care available to you was worse than no medical care at all. Doctors would drain your blood, make you vomit until you couldn't stand, and prescribe treatments based on astrology and ancient theories that were completely wrong. If you needed surgery, you got it with no anesthesia while multiple people held you down as you screamed. Justice was arbitrary and cruel. Steal to feed your family and lose your hand. Question authority and burn. Get accused of witchcraft by a neighbor with a grudge and there was no defense, no escape. The trial was theater. The outcome was predetermined. Your innocence didn't matter because the system wasn't designed to find truth. It was designed to maintain control through fear. The plague could arrive at any moment and kill half your village in weeks. There was no warning. No prevention. No cure. Just mass death on a scale that broke societies and traumatized entire generations. Survivors lived with grief and guilt and the knowledge that it could happen again. And it did. Repeatedly. Every aspect of life was precarious. Your home could collapse or burn down. Your crops could fail. Famine could strike. War could erupt. Bandits could raid your village. Any day could be your last, and you knew it. You lived with constant, grinding anxiety because there was no safety, no security, no guarantee of anything. And yet, people survived. Millions of them. They woke up every morning and kept going. They found moments of joy in festivals and holy days. They loved their families. They told stories. They sang songs. They made art. They built cathedrals that still stand today. They were human beings living human lives in the worst possible circumstances. That's perhaps the most important thing to understand about medieval Europe. It wasn't populated by different species or people somehow adapted to suffering. It was regular humans, just like us, enduring conditions that would break most modern people within days. They weren't stronger or tougher. They just had no choice. You either adapted to the brutality or you died. Most adapted. Many died anyway. The romantic version of the Middle Ages, the one we see in movies and read in fantasy novels, isn't completely false. Castles existed. Knights existed. Beautiful illuminated manuscripts and Gothic cathedrals and courtly love poetry. All real. But that was the life of maybe 1% of the population. The nobility. The clergy. The wealthy merchants in the largest cities. For everyone else, for the 99%, the Middle Ages were dark in every sense of the word. Dark with ignorance. Dark with superstition. Dark with violence and disease and early death. Dark with the knowledge that life was cheap and suffering was constant and escape was impossible. The secrets we've uncovered tonight, the witch hunts and the Inquisition and the plague and the filth and the brutality, these aren't anomalies. They're not exceptions to an otherwise pleasant era. They are the era. This is what medieval life actually was. And understanding that, really understanding it, should make us grateful for every modern convenience we take for granted. Antibiotics. Clean water. Anesthesia. The rule of law. The concept that maybe torture is bad and burning people alive is wrong. These aren't ancient wisdom. They're recent developments. Hard-won knowledge purchased with the suffering of countless generations who lived and died in the darkness. Medieval Europe wasn't a romantic adventure. It was a nightmare. A long, dark nightmare that lasted for centuries. And the fact that we've emerged from it, that we've built a world where most people don't die from infected cuts or watch their children starve or live in terror of religious persecution, is worth remembering. The dark secrets of medieval life aren't just historical curiosities. They're reminders of how bad things can get when superstition replaces knowledge. When authority is absolute and unquestioned. When human life is valued less than ideology. When fear is used as a tool of control. We've come a long way. But the distance we've traveled should teach us something. Progress isn't inevitable. Civilization is fragile. The darkness is always there, waiting. And if we're not careful, if we forget the lessons that history teaches, we could slip backward into our own version of the Dark Ages. But that's a thought for another night. For now, you've survived your journey through medieval Europe. You've seen the secrets they don't teach in school. You've witnessed the darkness that lurked behind the fairy tales. And hopefully, you'll sleep a little better tonight knowing that you live in a time and place where plague, torture, and public executions aren't daily realities. Sweet dreams. And be grateful. Very, very grateful.